other than life in prison. I mean, that to me is the only benefit he would receive in doing this.
Why did we have all this buildup in the days and the hours ahead about a plea deal, which would have had a lot more to it? And instead, all we get is not even a formal new plea, but just the intention to plea.
Yeah, well, nothing has been easy in this case, and his lawyers are litigating every aspect of this. I was always honestly skeptical of the prosecution team offering a deal in the first place, meaning they would give him some sort of benefit in exchange for not going to trial. They're not giving him any benefit here. He will get a benefit in the sentencing guidelines of an acceptance of responsibility, and because he's a first-time offender, I think this is his one shot at potentially getting something lower than life. And then there are state implications that we should talk about, but it's like a 3D chess game that his lawyers are playing, and perhaps they feel this is the best way to go.
Is there a motivation on the federal side for pushing it in this direction? I mean, what do they get out of this? They don't have to go to trial, right? So it's less work. What else?
Exactly. But again, this is not a deal, so they have no say in it, right? A criminal defendant can plead guilty at any time.
You don't think this is the result of conversations behind the scenes?
It could be. I think definitely, look, as a criminal defense attorney, you always want to see what you can get, right? But again, the prosecution just may not have been willing to give anything. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's ultimately his desire. But the prosecution, they do get, they don't have to go forward with the trial. They don't get, there's always a chance that you get that one rogue juror on the jury. And so, yeah, this case will not go to trial.
And the public fascination on this has been intense from the very beginning because it was a murder on a public street, or an alleged murder on a public street at this juncture. And because he became this kind of emblem of public frustration with healthcare and the healthcare system. We know Brian Thompson, the CEO's family's in the courtroom. With all these twists and turns to now, what do you make of things?
Well, it's dramatic in the courtroom right now. Our own Alice Gaynor is there, and she's updating us. A judge is actually checking if he is competent to announce this intention of a guilty plea. And so the judge just said he finds he is competent. So there was a lot of discussion about that. Brian Thompson's family, they're in court. This is a dramatic moment. And for so many people who have followed this case so closely, and there's been this upswell of support for Luigi Mangione. Let's see how this might affect that. I'm wondering if there's going to be some Mangione fatigue. People have been following this so closely. How is the public going to respond to this? It remains to be seen.
Tom Hansen is downtown for us, outside the federal courthouse. He's following all these details, has been from the beginning. Tom, what are you learning?
Hey there, Tony. Well, yeah, just a lot of buildup today. We're along with the media gaggle that basically stretches the entire block. And you can just imagine the scene inside that courtroom where our WCBS Alice Gaynor has been passing out notes to us. Mangione entering, feet shackled, hands behind his back, tan prison clothing, white T-shirt underneath. He looked at the gallery as he walked in, and in that gallery, of course, sits Brian Thompson's family, the UnitedHealthcare CEO, as you mentioned, who was murdered. And so a very extraordinary moment in the courtroom, perhaps the first time the family has been looking face to face to the man accused with murdering their loved one. Now, the question shifts to that other court case, the state case led by District Attorney Alvin Bragg. What does this mean for that? Well, the question here is, do any of the charges that he just pled guilty to overlap with the charges that he's facing in that case, where he is facing murder in the second degree and a slew of criminal possession of firearms charges as well. So really, you're talking about the federal case with the stalking charges being a case of threats, harassment, and surveillance, compared to the state case, which is a case talking about taking a life and possession of those lethal weapons. Obviously, we will be looking ahead to that other court case to see exactly how it shakes out, Tony. But as I mentioned, an extraordinary day here, a bombshell development in the Luigi Mangione saga, Tony.
Tom, thank you. Caroline, that word again, bombshell, because we were expecting one thing, maybe a plea deal. We got something else. And we were going to have jury selection on September 8th in the federal case, but we also had the state one. What does this mean? What do we know it to mean at this juncture for the state charges?
So right now, today, it means absolutely nothing, okay? Alvin
thought you might say
Bragg
that.
is full steam ahead, and
Yeah.
he's been very clear that he wants to prosecute Luigi Mangione in New York City for these crimes.
Understandably,
Right.
it's an alleged crime on the streets of New York City.
Exactly. He was first on the scene. He's always wanted to try this case first. It means nothing now. What it means for the defense team, they will almost certainly revive this double jeopardy claim that Tom was just talking about here. They've been arguing that from the start. They're saying, look, this case from the beginning shouldn't be prosecuted in unparalleled jurisdictions because it's the same underlying conduct. And that's the heart of the New York State double jeopardy law. You can't be charged for the same conduct and the same crime. Now, there are issues with that because these are separate sovereigns. It's a separate sovereign doctrine. And so they had been proceeding. I don't think ultimately it's a winning argument. I think the state case will move forward. However, I do think that it could put the state case on pause while they litigate this really important issue because it's not a frivolous argument to be making, and the judge will want to consider it very closely.
If he is guilty in the federal case, regardless of what happens in the state one, or if he's also guilty of the state charges, does he get to choose state or federal prison? And does that jurisdiction, I mean, where he's going to be spending his time potentially for decades, does that factor into this?
I think it has to be a huge factor. He's in federal custody now, even though he was going first in the state charge, which is interesting in and of itself. So he's in the MDC Brooklyn. Not a great facility, as we know, but perhaps much better than a state prison. So if he's sentenced first on the federal case, he'll serve his federal time first. And that could be, really desirable for someone in his position.
Really interesting. I see you nodding along, Anna. What are you thinking?
I mean, I'm thinking about Rikers Island versus MDC, two bad choices, but MDC is definitely the better one of the two.
Yeah.
I was just getting word from our control room that the judge just asked Mangione in open court, do you understand you could be sent to prison for life? And he said yes.
Yeah.
As this progresses today, he signals his intention to plead guilty. The judge then reads the details of what that intention could lead to. What's the timetable here? Could a plea actually be entered today or no?
No, a plea's not going to be entered today.
Is there anything slower than the legal process?
Glacial pace, right? The wheels of justice move slowly. But what will happen is, and we heard the judge asking him there, do you understand that this is not a deal? You are not getting anything in exchange. There are no promises on the table here. Now, his lawyer has likely told him, we have a better shot potentially at mitigating the sentencing than if we go to trial, but there are no promises by any means on the table here. So he's walking into this fully aware of what he's doing.
All right, Caroline Police here. Thanks to you, Anna Schechter, Tom Hansen downtown, and Alice Gaynor, last but not least, inside the courtroom with those great details. Appreciate all of you. And to recap, Luigi Mangione, the 28-year-old accused in the 2024 killing of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson on a New York City street, just announced in court he intends to plead guilty in the federal case. He still faces those very serious state charges, but it's unclear what will happen in that case with today's bombshell change. Our coverage will continue on CBS News 24/7, your local news, and tonight, of course, on the CBS Evening News. This has been a CBS News special report. I'm Tony DeCope.
You are watching continuing coverage on that breaking news out of New York in the case of Luigi Mangione, the man accused of gunning down UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson. So let's continue the conversation live to CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson. Okay, so Jessica, an intention to enter that guilty plea not happening today. Are you surprised by that?
No, this is not strange at all that you would tell the judge, here's what's going on in the case. We want to update you. There's an intention to enter a guilty plea. And then at a later date, you will actually enter that plea. What's also not at all unusual is that reporting from inside the courtroom indicates that the judge was asking a number of questions to make sure that what the defendant is doing is knowing and voluntary. There was some initial questions, essentially making sure that Luigi Mangione understood the rights that he was waiving. that he understood what pleading guilty would look like, and that he was doing so voluntarily, that nobody forced him to do that. And we will, I think, see this again when it comes to actually entering the plea. This is obviously one of the most serious things that somebody can do inside a courtroom, which is to say, I'm waiving my right to a trial and I'm going to give up my freedom as a result. Judges all across the country want to make sure that defendants understand exactly what they're doing when they make that decision.
Yeah, right. And we are getting notes in real time from inside that courtroom. And to sort of bring that to life, I want to let our viewers know, coast to coast and worldwide, what the judge is saying to Luigi Mangione. He says, I will not allow you to withdraw your guilty plea if you are unsatisfied with your sentence. Do you understand? Mangione answers yes. The judge then says, there is no plea agreement between you and the prosecution. And then the attorney, Karen Agnifilo, says that's correct. So to your point, the judge is wanting to make sure that every T is crossed, every I is dotted. The judge goes on to say, I will have my own obligation to determine what I think guidelines should be an appropriate sentence in your case. I've got to ask, though, knowing that the family of Brian Thompson is there today, thinking about the victim in this case, is Mangione coming out better for making this intended move today?
So I think that this has a potential benefit for Mangione in two different ways. One is that he's accepting responsibility, and when it comes to sentencing, that will be, I believe, the judge will put that in the mitigating factors. The additional reason I think that this could be helpful for Mangione is, read what we've been talking about throughout the morning. I think his defense will make an argument that the New York murder case has to be dismissed, because what they'll say is that under New York law, you can't have successive prosecutions for the same course of conduct. And they're going to say that the acts that gave rise to the federal stalking charges, which is what we're talking about this morning, and the acts that gave rise to the charges of intentional second-degree killing, that those are the same set of acts and facts and conduct. Now, I think there's a very good argument for the prosecution to make that, in fact, there's an exception under New York state law, and that the prosecution on the murder charges can move forward. But I think those are basically the two reasons that Mangione would decide to plead guilty with no offer on the table. Again, the idea that he's saying to the judge, I'm accepting responsibility, and the hope, I think it's not a frivolous argument, but I don't think it will be successful, that potentially the murder case could just be dismissed.
All right, and we are now from Alice Gaynor inside the court, dictating for us in real time, out of Luigi Mangione's own mouth, what happened there. He said in court, after years of enduring severe pain from a broken back and navigating health insurance system, I learned of UHC holding its annual investor conference in New York City. He then tells the date. He knew where it was. He knew the location, but also admits he knew it wasn't publicly disclosed. He then says in open court, I then researched the event online, saw that the largest healthcare organization with a state mission to make healthcare system work better for everyone would be attended by these company executives. He then goes on to spell out, used a 3D printer to make parts of a gun, put gun silencer in magazine. Jessica, pretty fascinating to hear that, number one, Mangione has laid out the intention to plead guilty, and then the judge is being very careful, saying you weren't threatened, you have not entered into any sort of an agreement with the prosecution, and now Mangione, in his own words, is giving us an inside look at his thinking, his planning, etc. This all sort of lays the groundwork for the eventuality, no?
I think that's right. And what Luigi Mangione is doing here is, as we talked about, one, saying, I'm doing this knowingly, I'm doing this voluntarily. And based on, Reed, the facts that you just read of his describing, I understood where the meeting was going to be. Here are the steps that I took to print, to use a 3D printer for a gun. What he's doing is laying out why he's guilty. When it comes to this federal stalking charge, the two federal stalking charges, they are based on threats, harassment, and surveillance. And what I hear from what he's telling the judge is that he's saying, yes, I did engage in all of those actions. So he is explaining why he's guilty. He's explaining why he is waiving his right to trial knowingly. And he's going to explain, I think, a number of times why nobody is forcing him into this. He understands what he's doing, and he's entering this of his own free will.
Wow. And he goes on to say in that courtroom, according to notes coming to us in real time from Alice Gaynor, I traveled to New York City with the intent to shoot Brian Thompson. On the morning, he says, I shot Mr. Thompson in Manhattan. When I did so, he says, I understood my actions would place him in fear of death or serious bodily injury. Then there is a note from inside the courtroom that the family of Mr. Thompson has their heads down, a couple of them weeping in open court. The judge then asks any reason that the defense why should not allow him to plead guilty. The answer is no. You've got to really think about this, these details now coming out of the mouth of Luigi Mangione, who really the public has only seen in his perp walks. We have not really heard from him out of his own mouth what happened. You've got to imagine Brian Thompson's family having a chilling day in court hearing this.
Oh, I mean, for the family, and unfortunately, this is not a unique circumstance. I mean, this is the case that we're covering today, but there are unfortunately tragedies that are unfolding in courtrooms throughout the country where you do have a victim's family. Sometimes it's a murder victim. Sometimes it's a victim of an assault or a battery, where the family sits there and they hear somebody say, yes, I did this intentionally. Yes, here was the planning. And the family, you have to imagine, is reliving an absolute horrifying experience again in the courtroom. Legally, what I hear Mangione doing is essentially ticking down the elements of these federal crimes and saying, this is why I'm guilty. And obviously, that's going to be an important part of a judge deciding to accept this guilty plea.
Yep, we can talk legalese all day long, but we have to remember these are the human stories behind the headlines. Jessica, thank you so much for helping us to understand a little bit better what's happening. If you're just now logging on or tuning in right now, CBS News and CBS News 24/7 continuing coverage of Luigi Mangione, not only saying he intends to plead guilty in the federal case, but also in open court in front of former UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson's family, essentially saying he did it and laying out how he did it and when he did it. Much more ahead on CBS News 24/7.
Who's our victim?
33 years old, naval intelligence officer.
Looks like there's a story there.
Oh, wow. That's really nice silk.
How about I just give you this highlights?
Everyone down!
The robbery and the murder are connected.
Genius, McGee.
Elite. Very elite.
NCIS is all new CBS Tuesday, 8/7 Central, and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We don't want to accept that there's evil that walks amongst us, but it does.
You know how when you meet somebody, you can't put your finger on it, but something's not right?
You never know what anybody is capable of.
I am a serial killer who's only killed once.
Did you think when this goes public, this town's gonna be shocked?
Absolutely.
When you're dealing with a 30-year-old cold case, it seems like there's not a lot of hope.
We knew there was a monster out there and we were going to find him and get him.
Look at him just coming around the corner like that.
We started tracking the area.
When did this accident scene become a crime scene?
Police!
You called him a lying liar who lies about lying.
Do you know why we're stopping you today?
What makes you so sure that you stabbed your sister while you were sleepwalking?
I never got a chance to see her one last time.
Such injustice. I can't believe they did this to her.
But no matter how hard it gets, never give up.
I'm Natalie Morales with 48 Hours. Did you have anything to do with Joanna Hunter's death?
This is a family that just wants justice.
I'm Tony DeCopel. The CBS Evening News is the story of America one day at a time.
I'm Tony.
There are big questions that all of us are asking. I want to get you the answers. So join me. This is the CBS Evening News.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nora O'Donnell, and this is Healthful. Every week, I bring you the latest science and trusted medical expertise to help you improve your health, your happiness, and just to improve your life. Healthful, a new CBS News podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
It's a good time. One of the best compliments we can ever get comes from you, the viewer, where people say, you know what? I always learn something when I watch your show. Here's today's eye-opener. It's your world in 90 seconds.
We want you to walk out the house fully equipped.
How to keep your skin plump, young,
Juicy, Nora.
juicy.
Join us, because we think what, Nate?
There's no better way to start your day.
What he said.
We continue following breaking news out of New York in the case of Luigi Mangione, the man who's accused of gunning down that UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson. We had told you before the break that Mr. Mangione told the judge he intended to plead guilty. The judge then went through a whole list of questions to make sure that Mangione knew the consequences of doing that in that federal case. Well, just a moment ago, Mangione pled guilty. He did what he said he intended to do. He pled guilty to shooting down and gunning down UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Okay, so this is the federal case, but there's much more ahead to talk about as far as the state case against Mangione. And in the hours ahead on CBS and CBS News 24/7, we'll be breaking down all of that. Meanwhile, let's talk about some international news that hits here in the United States. Poland says it thwarted a Russian plot to kill a dual U.S.-Ukrainian citizen in Warsaw. Poland's prime minister explained authorities managed to prevent the murder at the very last second. As CBS News foreign correspondent Ramy Inocencio is about to show you, this marks the first time in decades a Western leader has publicly accused Moscow of plotting to kill an American citizen.
Yes, we know the target was a U.S. citizen of Ukrainian origin and that the plan to kill him was also foiled with the help of U.S. services. Donald Tusk described him as someone who was uncomfortable for the Putin regime. Tusk also put this through the lens of NATO security. And remember that Poland is the eastern flank bulwark of NATO between Europe and Russia. And he said that this is the first situation where someone acting on Russian orders tried to kill an American citizen in another NATO country. Now, as for the would-be assassin, Tusk said that he was allegedly recruited by Russia's secret services and that he was arrested this time last week. Russia's foreign ministry has, at this point so far, though, made no comment. But it really won't come as a surprise, because in the eyes of many Western governments, Moscow has been ramping up this kind of campaign to cause problems in European countries that support Ukraine ever since Russia invaded that country. That's included sabotage, it included arson, and now this latest attempted killing we're finding out today. Poland's prime minister basically said to expect more to come in the future and a reason to be on alert. Back to you.
Ramy Inocencio, thank you. Meanwhile, British right-wing politician Nigel Farage keeps his seat in Parliament. In a special election, he beat out his main opposition, a man dressed as a trash can. None of the other major political parties contested that election. The vote triggered by Farage himself after he resigned amid an investigation over whether he failed to declare a $6.7 million gift from crypto billionaires. Farage has denied breaking any rules in relation to any of his finances. Senior correspondent for the BBC, Joe Pike, breaks down the election.
Opinion polls suggest Nigel Farage could be the UK's next Prime Minister. He's had a long relationship with President Trump, but he decided to hold this by-election, the equivalent of a special election, because he'd had many bad headlines and difficult questions about his finances. In particular, he'd received a gift from a crypto billionaire of £5 million. That's almost $7 million. And he'd not registered that with Parliament. That was before he became an MP. He says he didn't need to register it, but certainly it's prompted difficult questions and difficult media headlines too. So he called this special election, which he's won. He's partly won it because the other main parties did not field candidates. They boycotted it. But polls suggest even if they had done, he probably would have won too. Nigel Farage is clearly popular here in Clacton. The real question is what the last 5 or 6 weeks of this rather bizarre, surreal campaign has done for national perceptions of him. Has this bolstered his popularity amongst voters, or has it done the opposite? And there certainly are some signs of his popularity slightly waning in recent weeks. Meanwhile, an ongoing parliamentary investigation into that £5 million, $7 million gift continues. And if there is a significant sanction, that could eventually end up really where we started, with another by-election or special election. This is Joe Pike for BBC News for CBS News in Clacton.
Much more news ahead. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. We'll be right back.
We're U.S. Marshals. We do this job because others can't.
Saddle up, cowboy.
Over 25 million viewers have made CBS's Marshals TV's #1 new show.
Our Marshals came up big today.
Marshals, a new era of Yellowstone. New episodes CBS Sunday and streaming on Paramount+.
We don't want to accept that there's evil that walks amongst us, but it does.
You know how when you meet somebody, you can't put your finger on it, but something's not right?
You never know what anybody is capable of.
I am a serial killer who's only killed once.
Did you think when this goes public, this town's gonna be shocked?
Absolutely.
When you're dealing with a 30-year-old cold case, it seems like there's not a lot of hope.
We knew there was a monster out there and we were going to find him and get him.
Look at him just coming around the corner like that.
We started tracking the area.
When did this accident scene become a crime scene?
Police! You called him a lying liar who lies about lying.
Do you know why we're stopping you today?
What makes you so sure that you stabbed your sister while you were sleepwalking?
I never got a chance to see her one last time.
Such injustice. I can't believe they did this to her.
But no matter how hard it gets, never give up.
I'm Natalie Morales with 48 Hours. Did you have anything to do with Joanna Hunter's death?
This is a family that just wants justice.
Why doesn't he tell Republicans, come into my office, let's hammer this thing out?
Margaret, it's a totally fair question.
Politics isn't a game. Why are you opposed to this deployment?
It's unconstitutional.
Politics is about policy. I'm a voracious consumer of information, and I'm impatient. I don't like to be spun. To be moderator of Face the Nation means bringing the most powerful stakeholders to the table to become better informed.
Special Agent Goodman, calling glass.
You're a spy.
Well, nothing gets past the feds, does it? We got work to do. I don't really trust anyone. Those are the only people worth trusting.
CIA. New series CBS Monday after a new FBI.
Go to the ends of the earth, half a world away. Reach for the stars.
If I take time to think, they might go get Brad.
Experience thought-provoking,
Mystical in every sense of the word.
and truly original reporting.
That's your superpower.
There's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
Continuing CBS News 24/7 coverage with our eye on a New York City federal courtroom right now and all that is going on outside. The headline here, Luigi Mangione just said this word in court, guilty. He just pled guilty to the killing of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Now, here's how this all went down today. We first, as a news organization, heard that Mr. Mangione intended to plead guilty. He entered the courtroom. He sat down, Mr. Thompson's family in court as well, watching all of this play out. Mangione took the first step saying he intended to plead guilty. That triggered a question and answer between the judge and Mr. Mangione, essentially boiling it to the bones, making sure that if Mr. Mangione did what he eventually did, which was plead guilty, he knew and said in open court that he intended to do exactly that. I just want to go back and give you some of the notes from that exchange. Mr. Mangione states his full legal name, Luigi Nicholas Mangione, 28. He then goes on to characterize who he is by way of a master's degree in computer science. He then goes on to tell the judge that he has read his right. He answered yes to having read all of his rights relative to this. Mangione then looked at the prosecutor, as he explained, and then he listened to the judge. The judge saying, if you were to go to trial, the government would have to prove elements beyond a reasonable doubt. Do you understand this? Mangione answers yes. The judge then says, now I'm going to explain the possible maximum penalty for these crimes. Doesn't mean that that's what you'll get, but the total max is life in prison on both counts, 1 and 2, followed by then supervised release. Do you understand that? Yes. The judge then went over fines, wanted to make sure that Mangione confirmed he was an American citizen. The judge then went through a series of questions, making sure that Mangione was competent to stand trial or to enter this plea. The judge then said, I will have my own obligation to determine what I think guidelines should be and an appropriate sentence. The judge then asked Mangione, has anyone promised you anything to get you to plead guilty? No. The judge says, has anybody threatened you? Mangione answers, no. Has anyone promised you as to what your sentence will be if you plead guilty? No, Mr. Mangione says. Then this is where it gets very compelling. And again, as I tell you what Mangione said to that judge, keep in mind that former UnitedHealthcare CEO's family, who saw on that surveillance video their husband and father gunned down on a New York City street, they listened to this. Here's what Mangione is reported to have said from our producer in the courtroom giving real-time notes, Alice Gaynor. Mangione says, after years of enduring severe pain from a broken back and navigating the health insurance system, I learned UHC was holding its annual investor conference in New York City. He goes on to tell the judge he researched the event online. He knew the conference was there. He said he then traveled outside of New York to Manhattan. He then says, I emailed UHC leadership posing as an investor, requesting information about the conference. He then says he used a 3D printer to make parts of a gun, put a gun silencer and a magazine on that gun, then traveled to New York City. These are Mangione's words, with the intent to shoot Brian Thompson. He then says, on the morning, I shot Mr. Thompson in Manhattan. When I did so, Mangione says, I understood my actions would place him in fear of death or serious bodily injury. Let's bring in Jessica Levinson for what happened next. He then pled guilty. And the judge said, Jessica, I will accept your guilty plea. Walk us through your reaction, first of all.
So my reaction is that this is fairly typical of criminal cases throughout the country where you do see that something prevents the case from going to trial. Usually it is an agreement. Here it is a guilty plea without an agreement. My other reaction here is that this indicates that the defense, I think, knew it had a huge uphill battle when it came to this federal case. Again, it was slimmed down to just 2 charges based on federal stalking. And I think what the defense believed they could get in exchange for this guilty plea is potentially 2 things. One of them being accepting responsibility and hoping that that serves as a mitigating factor when the judge does give a sentence. The other, as we've been talking about, is the hope that in deciding to say, I'm pleading guilty, that includes a prosecution in the legal sense. So he has now been prosecuted for 1 course of conduct. What he's hoping is that under New York law, which prohibits successive prosecutions, that means that a judge will dismiss the murder charge against him. I think that's a difficult argument for him to make, but I think strategically that might be what went into this particular guilty plea.
So let's talk then, because today was all about that federal case, the state case in queue. What could happen there?
So when it comes to the federal case, obviously we're nearing the conclusion of that case. When it comes to the state case, we're going to see some litigation about that particular issue, which is, can that case move forward at all? This has nothing to do with the strength of evidence regarding the state case. It has everything to do with that New York law that says you can't be prosecuted twice for the same course of conduct. But that New York law does have exceptions. And I'm going to paraphrase here, but one of the big exceptions is when you're looking at two crimes that have substantially different elements. That, I believe, is true when it comes to federal stalking versus a state murder charge of second-degree intentional killing. And when the harms are substantially different. So when it comes to federal stalking, obviously what we're guarding against is a harm of threats or harassment, surveillance. When it comes to a state murder charge, the harm we're guarding against is the intentional taking of a life. So I think the prosecution does have a good argument here to be made that, in fact, New York's law does not prevent the prosecution, which is now about to conclude in the federal court, and then the next prosecution in the New York State court. But I don't think that New York trial is going to, the New York case is going to trial on September 8th. I think there's going to be substantial fighting about the issue we just talked about. Look for that date to be pushed out.
Well, we are hearing from the courtroom that Mangione was just let out in handcuffs. He will now continue his life behind bars while all of those arguments play out. Also, the family of that former UnitedHealthcare CEO leaving the room as well. So today's courtroom discussions are done, but now, to your point, the discussion about how to proceed and perhaps the change of dates on the calendar, that will be the next series of headlines to come out of this, no?
Well, that's right. I think so when it comes to the federal case, obviously it does still need to wrap up. The judge is still going to give a sentence and then look for things to really pivot to the New York case and whether or not that case will proceed at all. Again, for Mangione, I don't want to say it's a moonshot, but it's not a frivolous argument. But the argument he's going to make is, I have been prosecuted. I decided to plead guilty. Under the law, that is a prosecution. You cannot now prosecute me in a set of facts and conduct. And that's what you're going to try and do, New York, when you proceed with this murder trial. Now, a judge had essentially pause that particular argument because this is an argument Mangione made before and said, well, we haven't seen one prosecution. Now, once he's sentenced, we will see one completed prosecution. And then they will go back to the judge and say, okay, now the argument is ripe. Please conclude that he cannot be prosecuted in New York State court for this murder charge. And we know there are other charges as well. And so I think all eyes will move to that. Again, I think there's a very good argument for the prosecution to make.
Jessica, I'm seeing attorneys step forward in front of mics. I apologize, but let's listen in.
Friedman Agnifilo, and I represent Luigi Mangione. Today is a solemn and significant day. With today's guilty plea, Mr. Mangione has accepted full responsibility for the death of Brian Thompson, arising from the events of December 4th, 2024, outside of the UnitedHealthcare Investor Conference here in Midtown Manhattan. It was a single tragic event, yet he's being prosecuted twice for the same conduct. As Luigi explained in court today, he endured years of severe, debilitating pain following a broken back, while struggling to navigate our healthcare and health insurance systems. Like the thousands of people who have reached out since this tragedy to share their own experiences, he believed that the system had failed him and destroyed his life. Despite this being a single isolated event, Mr. Mangione has been unfairly treated since the outset in every way and has successfully fought off terrorism charges and the death penalty, while also fighting at the same time two simultaneous prosecutions in two jurisdictions who are trying to punish him twice for the exact conduct. He's been treated differently from every other defendant charged with this offense in New York. However, thankfully, New York law does not allow this. New York law does not permit a person to be prosecuted and punished twice for the exact same crime under a statute that governs successive prosecutions. It's also known as the double jeopardy law. Today's guilty plea triggers this statute, and we just filed our motion in state court explaining why the state charges must be dismissed under New York's double jeopardy protections. We will not be taking any other questions. Thank you so much for coming.
Does your client have any remorse for the man he shot in the back?
So there you have it, making the arguments before the public that they just made in front of the judge, attorneys for Luigi Mangione. Katrina Kaufman, let's talk to you right now about all of these developments, joined by Tom Hansen, who is also there. Want to ask you both, first of all, what is the reaction outside the courtroom to everything we've just heard? Tom, let's start with you.
Hey there, Reed. Well, as you can see, that press conference that we just heard from is right over there. And there is kind of a chaotic scene. There's a media gaggle. Notably, there are not that many supporters, unlike previous times for Luigi Mangione, where it was kind of a crazy scene of them protesting Free Luigi, all of those things. It's my understanding, Katrina, that some of them were actually inside today. What can you tell us about that?
They were, and I was speaking to some of them as we were about to begin this proceeding. They were worried about what was going to happen, but they said that they supported Luigi no matter what, and that they believe that the defense had a plan here, even if he was going to plead guilty, Tom.
And clearly that's what we understand from that press conference, that the defense is going to pursue that double jeopardy argument, saying that Luigi cannot be charged with the same crimes twice. Now, that gets us to this critical question of, do the crimes in these cases overlap at all? And if so, how? That is going to be what the defense has to prove moving forward here. Obviously, Katrina, you're a lawyer, so you're a de facto an expert on this. So what do you make of that?
I mean, New York does have a very strict double jeopardy law, but it depends also on the overlap of the charges, on when they consider this to be an actual conviction. So the double jeopardy law kicks in. This will all get litigated before the state judge now. So he will really have a lot of discretion about how he wants to handle this. But from speaking to sources in the district attorney's office, Tom, it seems highly likely that that state trial is going to be delayed while all of this gets figured out.
And
Katrina,
we just heard from those attorneys that they have filed in state court. They have now filed in state court, Tom, the paperwork that literally scaffolds off of what we saw in federal court today to do just that.
Exactly. And, you know, I think that there is a strong argument that they would rather see Mangione in a federal prison than in a state prison, and also rather not have this trial move forward at all. It means when sentencing happens, there are less facts before the judge, there's less evidence that has come out. But I do want to highlight, I was just in court when Luigi Mangione was pleading guilty. One thing he mentioned that I don't believe I had heard before is he said when he was trying to figure out where this investor conference was going to happen, he knew UnitedHealthcare would have their annual investor conference, but
Good afternoon. I'm Jamie McDonald, United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York. At 6:45 on a December morning, Luigi Mangione stalked and murdered Brian Thompson in cold blood on a public sidewalk in Midtown Manhattan. Just a few moments ago, Mangione pled guilty to his heinous act. This was not a spontaneous act of violence. It was deliberate, calculated, and premeditated. In the days leading up to the murder, the defendant very carefully prepared for the attack. He tracked Mr. Thompson's whereabouts, conducted surveillance along the route he knew Mr. Thompson would take, and positioned himself to carry out the plan. Then, on a sidewalk on West 54th Street, the defendant murdered Mr. Thompson, shooting him from behind with a 9mm handgun equipped with a silencer. He shot Thompson twice at close range. The second shot came as Mr. Thompson turned and faced the defendant. The defendant did this as everyday New Yorkers walked nearby, and while the rest of the city woke up to start their day. Mangione then ran away, leaving Mr. Thompson to die. The defendant committed this murder in an attempt to draw public attention to his dislike of certain businesses. But we live in a civilized society governed by the rule of law. We debate, we disagree, we protest. We do not commit murder. No grievance, political belief, or ideological cause can ever justify murder. There can be no celebrity in assassination. Any person who celebrates, encourages, or excuses actions like these is fundamentally wrong. Mangione attempted to send a public message through violence, but the message that emerges today is very different. Violence is not a legitimate instrument to promote any political or social message. And those who resort to violence in an effort to advance their beliefs will be prosecuted, convicted, and put in jail. Today, the Southern District of New York, together with our law enforcement partners, writes the final chapter of Mangione's federal prosecution. Now, he stands convicted in federal court and faces life in prison. One other point that's important to note. While the defendant pled guilty, our office does not have a plea agreement with him. Instead, he pled open, which means he pled guilty to all pending counts in the indictment. There are no accommodations or concessions, and we are free to seek the maximum penalty under the law. I'd like to thank the dedicated prosecutors of our office's Violent Organizations and Crime Unit, who are beside me, for their remarkable efforts to bring this case. I would also like to thank the NYPD and the FBI, whose tireless and incredibly sophisticated investigative efforts made this conviction possible. Finally, I want to express on behalf of all of us here our deepest sympathy and compassion for the many family members and friends of Brian Thompson. Mr. Thompson's family and many of his friends were in court for the guilty plea today. I know they will have an opportunity to be heard at sentencing. We all stand in awe of their love for their family and for their friend, and their unwavering commitment to seeing justice done in this case. We hope they can take some solace in the fact that from the beginning, we have brought the full force of the federal government to bear in this case. In this prosecution, we have consistently pursued the maximum penalties under the law as necessary and just punishment for these crimes. The result achieved today now allows our office to seek the maximum penalty allowed, life imprisonment, which, as I've conveyed to Mr. Thompson's family, is what we intend to seek. I'll now turn it over to Commissioner Tisch.
Good afternoon. Thank you, U.S. Attorney McDonald, and thank you to the prosecutors and the federal law enforcement partners who have worked alongside the New York City Police Department throughout this case. Today, Luigi Mangione pleaded guilty in connection with the murder of Brian Thompson on a Midtown Manhattan sidewalk in December of 2024. This is an important moment of accountability, and my thoughts remain first and foremost with Mr. Thompson's family and everyone who knew and loved him. But I also want to take a few minutes today to recognize the extraordinary police work that brought us here. From the moment that Mr. Thompson was assassinated on the morning of December 4th, the NYPD mobilized an enormous investigative effort. Our detectives combed through thousands of hours of surveillance video, followed up on hundreds of tips, and worked through an extraordinary volume of forensic and digital evidence. They used some of the most sophisticated technology available to law enforcement, and they paired it with the kind of painstaking, old-fashioned detective work that has defined the New York City Police Department for generations, interviewing witnesses, canvassing neighborhoods, retracing the suspects' movements, and pursuing every viable lead. Most importantly, they developed a clear image of the man we were looking for and got that image out to the public and to law enforcement agencies across this country 5 days after the murder. That work paid off in Altoona, Pennsylvania, where an alert member of the public recognized Mangione and local police took him into custody. That was not simply a lucky break. It was the culmination of 5 days of relentless investigative work that gave the public the information it needed to recognize the suspect and gave our law enforcement partners what they needed to act. This case began with the worst kind of violence on our streets. It was answered by the very best of the New York City Police Department. To every member of the NYPD who played a role in this investigation, you should be enormously proud for bringing us to this day. And to those who idolize Luigi Mangione, I say this: violence is not a cause, murder is not a message, and a killer is certainly not a hero. Now I'd like to introduce the FBI's Assistant Director in Charge for the New York Field Office, Jim Barnacle.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good day. My name is James Barnacle. I'm the Assistant Director in Charge of the FBI New York Field Office. I want to begin by addressing the family, friends, and colleagues of Brian Thompson. We had the chance to sit down with the family this morning, and they are still grieving, and they have been grieving for almost 2 years as Brian was taken away in the most heinous way possible. They lost a son, a brother, a husband, and a father, and a friend to many colleagues and other people. The family deserves closure, the clarity, and the assurance that every step taken throughout our investigation, the New York City Police Department's investigation, the Altoona Police Department's investigation, and the U.S. Attorney's Office prosecution reflected the gravity of the situation and the importance of Brian's life. While today's plea doesn't replace the void he left behind, I hope it offers a glimmer of the closure that the Thompson family and friends deserve. This tragedy shocked the nation and left a deep impact on everyone it touched. Violence driven by hostility toward opportunity and success stands in sharp contrast to the values true Americans hold dear. But rest assured, this FBI and our partners never stopped working to bring this killer to justice. While a plea was entered today, we know the crime has not been erased. Thank you to the FBI's Violent Crime Task Force, our largest partner on that task force, the New York City Police Department, the New York State Police Department. Thank you to the prosecutors and the United States Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, led by Jamie McDonald. Thank you. And I want to thank the officers and detectives of the New York City Police Department, led by Commissioner Tisch, for your agency's unwavering pursuit of truth and accountability. Thank you, Commissioner. I'd also like to thank the Altoona Police Department in Pennsylvania and the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections, who helped facilitate the extradition to New York. We're incredibly grateful to our partners, and we wish the Thompson family comfort and strength as the legal process continues. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you. Thank you all.
And there you have it. Word from U.S. Attorney Jamie McDonald, New York City Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch, and Mr. Barnacle from the FBI announcing what they say is the final chapter of the federal prosecution of Luigi Mangione. Tom Hansen and Katrina Kaufman outside where that news conference just happened. My friends, I apologize for having to cut you off, but we thought it was important for our viewers to hear from those three officials. And what rises out of this for me is a contrast. Of course, we know in federal court today, Luigi Mangione blamed a bad back and frustration with the healthcare system in the country, and yet the message over and over from those three officials, violence not a cause, murder is not a message.
Yeah, just some really powerful words coming out of those officials who we just heard talking there. But Reed, there is also this secondary case that still is unfolding in real time. And as I mentioned earlier, that double jeopardy very much going to be a focus of the legal discourse heading forward. I want to just pinpoint such an extraordinary set of events that happened today inside the courtroom where Katrina was. She was in the courthouse. So Katrina, what was it like seeing Luigi Mangione face to face with Brian Thompson's family for the first time?
Yeah, I mean, it was a really powerful moment, Tom. As soon as Mangione walked into court in his khaki prison jumpsuit, shackled, the room just went completely deadly silent. And usually he sometimes has a bit of bravado about him. He was so serious. He didn't appear to make eye contact with anyone. I did not see him looking towards Brian Thompson's family and friends who were filling a row, but Brian Thompson's wife was watching him very closely during a lot of this hearing. And of course, to hear Luigi Mangione speak himself before the judge, to admit his guilt, and then to also detail what he did, the back problems that you referenced, Reed, but also, as I was saying before, that he had actually posed as an investor in order to find the location of this UnitedHealthcare conference. This was all part of the premeditation that the prosecution is saying was there, that this was planned out. He spent time trying to track down Thompson, trying to figure out where this conference was going to take place. And there was also a moment in court where the prosecution detailed their evidence against him, the video they have of Mangione traveling in a taxi, of him sort of casing Brian Thompson the day before this murder happened outside the hotel, and then of course of that morning. And they talked about this moment when Thompson turned, and you can see him right before he shot for a second time. And the prosecution affirmed that Thompson appeared to be aware of what was going on in that moment. And I looked over and I saw someone from his family just shaking their head in what can only be perceived as grief, that he was really aware of what was happening when this killing took place.
And Katrina, just really quick, and Reed, just really quick, jumping off of this nugget of information, this detail that he posed as an investor in order to get information about the conference, which was not publicly disclosed. One of the things that he did say was, unlike previous interactions, unlike previous interactions with insurers, I received a response within an hour. That gives you a little bit more of a window into some of the subtext here, that he was frustrated with the healthcare system, but when it came to investors, he says that he was able to get a timely response. And just an interesting detail there that I wanted to point out.
I'd also like to add one other thing. The judge, more than once during this hearing, told Luigi Mangione very clearly she will not let him withdraw this guilty plea. And despite all of that, he said he understood everything about the charges against him, about what he was admitting, and at the very end of this hearing, he affirmed that he is guilty. And back at this press conference, Reed, as we heard from the officials that were just speaking, and Jessica Tisch, et cetera, this really does make an extraordinary end to the federal chapter of this case that has been going on for so long, an extraordinary end for the prosecutors in this case. And obviously, they no longer have to allocate the time or the resources that they were going to have to allocate for such a high-profile court case that was so tense and so charged, Reed.
Tom Hansen, Katrina Kaufman, inside and outside of the courtroom where this historic case plays out, at least for the federal case. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's talk to Anna Schechter. Anna, let's bring you in. You know, you and I covered this case on the air many times, having conversations about how this happened, even before Mr. Mangione was caught by police in Altoona, Pennsylvania. I want to go back to some of how Mangione, for the first time, we hear from him the planning. In fact, to use U.S. Attorney Jamie
Reed,
McDonald.
I just lost the IFB, but you were just alluding to what was going on for those 5 days during that manhunt. And we just heard from NYPD Commissioner Jessica Tisch lauding the actions of the NYPD and getting that photo of him out there. Remember those eyebrows? There was that photo of him in the cab. You see his eyebrows, he's wearing a mask, and that image was just blasted all over the country. And thanks to that, you had people in the McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania recognize him. And it was a stunning moment then. This is a bombshell today. There's been so much reporting around, will it be a plea deal? Will he just say he intends to plea and he could change his mind? No, he entered his guilty plea, and he told the judge that he understands that he cannot change his plea. Now what remains to be seen, of course, there's sentencing, and then what happens to that New York State case. Now I can't hear you, so I'm gonna sign off, Reed.
Well, but that's okay, because we'll get that fixed, but that scaffolds perfectly to talk to Jessica Levinson, our legal expert for CBS News. Jessica, let's talk about that state case, the double jeopardy. It sounds like this is going to be Luigi Mangione's defense next strategy. In fact, during their statement before the media, they say that Mangione, their client, was failed by the system. He was treated unfairly. They say their strategy is now to file, which they have, by the way, to make sure that he is not tried twice for the same crimes.
Well, that's right. And I want to mention, I think, two potential impacts of the guilty plea when it comes to the state case. We've been talking about one of them, and I want to highlight another. The first is the idea that, as we heard, Mangione is going to argue that that state case has to go away entirely, because he's going to say that New York law prohibits these successive prosecutions based on the same set of conduct or same set of facts. Now, as we've talked about, I think the prosecution has a good argument to be made that these are substantially different crimes, federal stalking versus a state murder charge, and that we're trying to protect against substantially different harms. But here's the other thing that I think we should talk about, which is, if that New York State case does move forward, then I believe that there's a good chance that the admissions that we just heard in open court this morning could be introduced in the state trial. So we have to acknowledge that this is a very consequential decision for Mangione. Again, not just pleading guilty without an offer. There was no plea deal. He just decided to plead guilty. But also the possibility that if the New York case does move forward, that what he said about admitting to the federal stalking charges could potentially be admitted in the New York murder case. That would obviously be hugely consequential for him.
Jessica, we just got this into our newsroom from the family of Brian Thompson, that former UnitedHealthcare CEO. Here's what they say after weeping in court today and hearing Mr. Mangione lay out how he killed their husband and father. They say today's guilty plea marks an important step toward justice for Brian and for our family. While nothing will ease the pain of losing him, we are grateful that the federal justice system has held the person responsible for this heinous act accountable. Now we look to the court to ensure that sentencing reflects the severity of his crime. We remain mindful that additional proceedings in New York and Pennsylvania are still to come, and they say, we will continue to seek justice Brian deserves. That statement attributed to the family, the Thompson family. Your reaction, first of all, to what they had to say, because they point to the fact that we still will hear hearings out of New York and Pennsylvania.
Well, that's right. I mean, my first reaction, honestly, is a human reaction, which is they've dealt with a terrible tragedy, and one has to assume having to relive portions of that today. And I don't know what else to say other than they must be deeply suffering as a result of this. Legally, my reaction is that they're doing a couple of things. One, they're highlighting that they do not want the federal judge to be particularly lenient in these federal stalking case. And two, they're highlighting that this might not be the end of legal accountability for Mangione, and they're pointing to the other cases, and of course the New York case, I think, being the biggest case, and the case that we've been talking about is coming up. And so they're highlighting that, legally speaking, this is not the end of the road.
And legally speaking, as we harken back to what Mangione said in court today, laying out the printing of 3D gun parts, using a silencer, even posing as somebody other than who he was to gain information about the location of where Mr. Thompson would be. Do his words feed the state's case or starve the state's case? If you're one of those attorneys for the state and you're looking to the next chapter of this, do you feel like he actually helped them?
So I think what he's done today in court is obviously acknowledge criminal conduct. And you have to assume that if that New York case does move forward, that the prosecution will say, potentially not. I want to separate two things, and I want to caveat all of this with there likely will be a fight. But even if the prosecution isn't able to admit that there was a guilty plea, they could try to introduce the admissions that Mangione made. And he has said, as you just detailed, Reed, he has made a lot of comments about what he did leading up to this particular tragedy. And for the prosecution, I don't know how else to characterize this as other than hugely helpful for them. Now, it doesn't mean that every crime is automatically proven beyond a reasonable doubt in the state case, but these admissions are damaging for Mangione. And obviously, state prosecutors are going to seek to introduce that to a potential jury if that case does go to trial.
Well, and obviously, before Mangione stood up to say what he said in open court, those words he said had to have gone through a heavy filter of his legal representation. He admitted to what he did, but he gave a preface for the why portion of what he did. Knowing that those words were likely highly crafted, why would he state the why and go into the why, the bad back, frustration with the system, the healthcare system in our country, before he got to the what? Why would he do that?
So part of this, obviously, is he's speaking to somebody who is about to provide him with a sentence and who has a lot of discretion as to whether or not it's going to be a relatively light sentence or a relatively heavy sentence. And I think what he's trying to do is explain himself and say, I didn't just decide to walk down the street and murder somebody in cold blood for no reason. Now, whether or not a judge views these, as truly mitigating factors is not clear. But I think what we see is he's trying to say, this is what led up, this is what was in my mind, and he's obviously trying to make himself sound like a sympathetic person.
And while I give you just a second to clear your throat there, my friend, and I understand that we are humans after all, let's go ahead and break down what Mangione said in court. U.S. Attorney Jamie McDonald, Anna, said he prepared, surveilled, planned, and positioned. And that really speaks to so many comments that, Anna, you and I had when we covered this case, not only from when the bullet flew that took Mr. Thompson's life, but also, Anna, the manhunt, and then seeing him caught and apprehended in Altoona, Pennsylvania.
It is really a stunning day today. And I'm just looking at this graphic here, these two federal counts. Let's rewind the clock when first he was a man on the run, then he's apprehended in Altoona, Pennsylvania, then charged in state court. 11 counts initially, which we know were reduced, of course, then the federal charges, then kind of this fight between state and federal, whose case is going to go first. And now here we are, weeks before the state trial is supposed to start September 8th, and Mangione pleads not guilty to the two federal charges, and he cannot change his plea. So a huge day here, Reed, and I think it's important to put this in perspective. Of course, we're also seeing a statement from the Thompson family saying today's guilty plea marks an important step towards justice for Brian and for our family. While nothing will ease the pain of losing him, we are grateful that the federal justice system has held the person responsible for this heinous act accountable. I also just heard from a source inside the district attorney's office, that's in the state case, of course, and they're telling me that they are prepared to continue to litigate the state case, but they're acknowledging that this is an important step for the Thompson family, who of course is still grieving 2 years after Brian Thompson was gunned down in broad daylight in Midtown Manhattan. Reed?
Part of the reason we're so glad to have you with us at CBS is crime is your bread and butter. You study how crimes happen, how they play out, how they're investigated. How did it strike you to, for the first time, hear Luigi Mangione in his own words in that courtroom today?
to see his own words describing the calculation that went into this crime. He was preparing this for weeks. He posed as an investor, and he made a point to make himself seem sympathetic, talked about debilitating back pain that, Reed, we had talked about. We were surmising that might have played into it. But to hear him actually lay this out today, it is stunning. And at that moment, members of Brian Thompson's family started crying a little bit. But that was the justification, and he acknowledges that he did it. Not only did he plan to attend this investor conference, he then got the ghost gun. He used a 3D printer to fasten a silencer to it. He got the magazine. He traveled across the country, and then he was lying in wait, waiting for this man. And I wonder if in Mangione's mind right now, if he is considering, wait a minute, did I blame all the problems with America's healthcare system on this one man who is an executive at one part of this huge healthcare conglomerate? I wonder if that's going through his mind. I wonder if he feels regret. Because to target one individual when you have systemic shifts in terms of private equity getting involved in healthcare, how can you pin this on one man? I wonder if he understands that the justification that he gave today, the back pain, his difficulty getting responses from insurance companies, if that makes sense to anybody sitting there in the courtroom. And I think Jessica Tisch, the New York City police commissioner, has said it best, that anyone who is cheering for Luigi Mangione, you should think about Brian Thompson's family and the grief that they are experiencing. And she makes it very clear, this kind of quote unquote vigilante justice, if you will, there is no place for this in society. Reed?
Yeah, murder is not a message, what she said, and I will end our coverage on this note and this headline in this way. Luigi Mangione in court talked about his pain, but made no mention of the pain of the Thompson family. You're watching continuing CBS News and CBS News 24/7 coverage. Luigi Mangione ending the federal part of his case by saying he's guilty. We'll be right back.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nora O'Donnell, and I want to tell you about my new podcast, Healthful. Every week, I bring you the latest science, Dr. Brem, myth-busting, and trusted medical expertise.
Perimenopause is hormonal chaos. We have biology to help you not suffer.
To help you improve your health, your happiness. This is like such an aha moment, and just to improve your life. I think talking about this is so incredibly important. Healthful, a new CBS News podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
One of the best compliments we can ever get comes from you, the viewer, where people say, you know what? I always learn something when I watch your show. It's today's eye-opener. It's your world in 90 seconds.
We want you to walk out the house fully equipped.
How to keep your skin plump, young.
Juicy, Nora. Juicy. Join us, because we think what, Nate?
There's no better way to start your day.
What he says.
Go to the ends of the earth, half a world away, and reach for the stars.
If I take time to think, they might go get Brad.
Experience thought-provoking,
Something that speaks to people across time.
innovative,
It's this magical process.
and truly original reporting.
You've discovered you're more of a songwriter. Where does that leave you?
Great question. Because there's always something new under the sun.
There's a lot more on the menu.
On CBS Sunday morning.
Why doesn't he tell Republicans, come into my office, let's hammer this thing out?
Margaret, it's a totally fair question.
Politics isn't a game. Why are you opposed to this deployment?
It's unconstitutional.
Politics is about policy. I'm a voracious consumer of information, and I'm impatient. I don't like to be spun. To be moderator of Face the Nation means bringing the most powerful stakeholders to the table to become better informed.
I'm Tony DeCopel. The CBS Evening News is the story of America one day at a time.
I'm Tony.
While we cover a lot of ground, we also stick to the basics. What's real?
Do you ever get scared?
Yeah. And what's important.
I'm just asking you why you're here and what your message is.
Success for us is not how much we pack into a show, but how much you take away from it. And we'll always end with the good stuff, something to remind you that there's a lot of life out there beyond the headlines. So join me. This is the CBS Evening News.
New information coming into CBS News 24/7.
Liftoff pilots like we never saw the helicopter.
Clash between federal agents and
the suspect waited for quite some time.
What the court did was really spend a lot of time looking at the Constitution.
This Marshall's team was designed to be the last line of defense in the region.
Saddle up, cowboy.
Try to keep up.
Welcome back to CBS News 24/7 on this big and historic news day. Luigi Mangione pleads guilty in that federal case. Now we are going to move on to other headlines in the world. Poland says it has thwarted a Russian plot to kill a dual U.S.-Ukrainian citizen. Played out in Warsaw. Now, Poland's prime minister explained authorities managed to prevent that murder at the very last moment. CBS News foreign correspondent Remi Inocencio reports this marks the first time in decades a Western leader has publicly accused Moscow of plotting to kill an American citizen.
Yes, we know the target was a U.S. citizen of Ukrainian origin and that the plan to kill him was also foiled with the help of U.S. services. Donald Tusk described him as someone who was uncomfortable for the Putin regime. Tusk also put this through the lens of NATO security. And remember that Poland is the eastern flank bulwark of NATO between Europe and Russia. And he said that this is the first situation where someone acting on Russian orders tried to kill an American citizen in another NATO country. Now, as for the would-be assassin, Tusk said that he was allegedly recruited by Russia's secret services and that he was arrested this time last week. Russia's foreign ministry has at this point so far, though, made no comment. But it really won't come as a surprise because in the eyes of many Western governments, Moscow has been ramping up this kind of campaign to cause problems in European countries that support Ukraine ever since Russia invaded that country. That's included sabotage, it included arson, and now this latest attempted killing we're finding out today. Poland's prime minister basically said to expect more to come in the future and a reason to be on alert. Back to you.
Remi Inocencio, thank you. Let's stay on that side of the pond. British right-wing politician Nigel Farage gets to keep his seat in Parliament. In a special election, he beat out his main opposition, a man dressed of all things as a trash can. Well, none of the other major political parties contested that election. The vote triggered by Farage himself after he resigned amid an investigation over whether he failed to declare a $6.7 million gift from a crypto billionaire. Farage has denied breaking any rules in relation to any of his finances. Senior correspondent for the BBC, Joe Pike, breaks down that election.
Opinion polls suggest Nigel Farage could be the UK's next Prime Minister. He's had a long relationship with President Trump, but he decided to hold this by-election, the equivalent of a special election, because he'd had many bad headlines and difficult questions about his finances. In particular, he'd received a gift from a crypto billionaire of £5 million. That's almost $7 million. And he'd not registered that with Parliament. That was before he became an MP. He says he didn't need to register it, but certainly it's prompted difficult questions and difficult media headlines too. So he called this special election, which he's won. He's partly won it because the other main parties did not field candidates. They boycotted it. But polls suggest even if they had done, he probably would have won too. Nigel Farage is clearly popular here in Clacton. The real question is what the last 5 or 6 weeks of this rather bizarre, surreal campaign has done for national perceptions of him. Has this bolstered his popularity amongst voters, or has it done the opposite? And there certainly are some signs of his popularity slightly waning in recent weeks. Meanwhile, an ongoing parliamentary investigation into that £5 million, $7 million gift continues. And if there is a significant sanction, that could eventually end up really where we started, with another by-election or special election. This is Joe Pike for BBC News for CBS News in Clacton.
Joe, thank you. Well, after an airline passenger in Greece was nearly sucked out of a shattered airplane window, new details now about what happened. CBS News senior transportation correspondent Chris Van Cleve gets more understanding on the scare in the skies directly from the National Transportation Safety Board.
It was a broken fan blade in the number 2 engine on this Ryanair flight last month that blew out a cabin window, partially sucking a passenger out of the plane mid-flight. He suffered serious injuries but survived. Now we're getting a new look at the damage to the Boeing 737, as the engine failure sent debris slicing through the fuselage and horizontal stabilizer by the plane's tail. Pilots got a warning about engine vibrations shortly before hearing a loud bang. Inside the mangled engine, National Transportation Safety Board investigators found bird remains that have been sent for further study. They don't know yet if they came from a fresh bird strike or one of 4 earlier strikes experienced by the same engine. Investigators also found signs of metal fatigue with the fan blade that broke off. Former NTSB Chair Robert Sumwalt.
What I'm thinking is that we had fatigue that had been accruing over time, and then the bird strike was the final straw.
In 2018, investigators blamed engine blade metal fatigue after a passenger died in a similar accident on a Southwest 737. That prompted new inspection requirements, inspections that were recently done on the Ryanair